Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the PixelPerfectPodcast. Today's the first episode of what is hopefully going to be many more to come. So, in each episode of the PixelPod, I will do a conversation with someone, and hopefully it's going to last around 45 minutes to an hour, or possibly longer, depending on the questions we ask, the topic, or the person that we're talking to. The date and time of our future episodes will be announced on my Discord server, which you can find linked in the YouTube's video description or in my Twitch panels. You can also join by doing !Discord on my Twitch chat. So I'd love to have guests come and talk about a lot of different things, video games, speedrunning, card collecting like we're doing today, and possibly, completely other topics, unrelated stuff. So each episode will end with a question and answer section from chat. So anyone who's watching the live stream can type something in chat and they can ask the guest a question. So again, that'll be at the very end of the stream. So yeah, all episodes, of course, will be recorded and they will go up on my YouTube afterwards. So without further ado, this is going to be the first episode with KreatorKat. So welcome, KreatorKat. So hello, KreatorKat. Welcome to the stream. This is the first time you have made an appearance. Also a face reveal, so welcome.
Sorry, 1 second. I have accidentally duplicated my audio.
Oh no. Technical difficulties already.
It's gone. We're good. All right. Hello, guys. I am KreatorKat. My real name is Justin, unlike Pixel over here. I'm all right with people calling me that. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Pixel's first episode here and talking about game collecting and card collecting and also a little bit of speedrunning, all things I love to do.
So we're going to jump right into it. So, like Creator said, he does a lot of card collecting and he collects a lot of old video games. So, what can you just tell us about, collecting, like in general? What is collecting? What do you do?
Well, collecting in general just means the idea of wanting to have some sort of set of things, whether it be coins of a particular type, or games of a particular type, or vinyl records, or CDs, or any particular thing that you enjoy learning about, talking about, using, and you want to have all sorts of different kinds of them that are interesting for all sorts of different reasons.
So, what would you consider like something collecting? If you have like three things of an object, if you have three trophies, would you say you have a trophy collection?
I think absolutely. You can call collecting whatever you want to call it. If you only have one or two of something, if they encompass your enjoyment of that sort of thing, and that's all you really need to feel fulfilled that you have a set of things that you want, or if those things are like games and those are the only games you are going to use. I think anyone can call themselves a collector as long as they're highly interested in something. They like to have the physical versions of it, or have they enjoy the history behind it and they want to have them in their possession rather than just as like a concept. I think
Definitely. You can do like collecting for like anything, in my opinion, at least. Like I said, if you have like a trophy collection of like three things, it's still a collection, Even if you don't have that many of something, you can still call yourself a collector. You can still call yourself like a fan of something, even if you don't have that many. But would you say like what's the difference of just being an average player or being like a collector? Like what's the difference between that?
Well, when it comes to video games, there's a few things I like to say as a collector. But first, this doesn't have to do with the physical owning of the objects, but it's about the history of games. Generally, obviously, you can be a collector of just the PS4 or whatever. There certainly are people who have hundreds of different PS4 games and they don't buy them to play. They just want the whole collection.
Yeah.
Generally, game collectors tend to be interested in the history of gaming and, the history of the market, the rise of companies, and all sorts of oddities and things that have happened in gaming history. And then they like to own things that might represent that. Like, say for something as simple as owning a copy of the original Super Mario Brothers, even if you aren't a huge Mario fan. Like the amount that means to the gaming industry cannot be understated, and that's pretty cool. Of course, being a collector in a way, there are people who consider themselves to be digital collectors, but generally, people being a collector means you want to have the physical copies of things. So having physical copies of games and cartridges and discs rather than just using an emulator or downloading them on the virtual console or whatever. Those are perfectly reasonable ways to play, especially considering price and accessibility. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, to be a collector, those people are interested in having the originals. Um, Also, another thing that collecting is great for is game preservation. So obviously, we know that games are a medium that hasn't seen the sort of preservation efforts that have music or movies or whatever. And there are some games that are straight up lost to time because they were distributed over like
Yeah.
connection services, like the old SNES, the Teleview, or stuff like that, or the Sega
Mm-hmm.
Channel, and they're just not even around anymore. And that makes people like me really sad that those were lost, and we want to see what is still available be preserved because discs rot over time, and cartridges, they're a little more hardy, but eventually they do break down. We want to see this stuff protected and maintained. And we also like to, this is not true for every collector, but they tend to like to use the original controllers, say, playing Mario with an NES controller rather than playing
Mm-hmm.
it with a keyboard or some sort of knockoff controller. Using the originals, even just the original brand, is a big deal. Um, and like I said, of course, if you not every person has to apply to every single one of these things. Um, if you like some other weird controller, that doesn't mean you're suddenly not a collector. These are just sorts of things that tend to define game collectors in general, but they're not all rules. And lastly, game collectors tend to like things beyond the physical games themselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
memorabilia. Like, of course, tons of people like to have their amiibos or plushies or whatever it might be for games or posters. And I mean, maybe you're not even a collector of games, you're just a collector of amiibos. That's perfectly reasonable too.
So I know on the topic of like if people play like like NES games with like a keyboard or whatever, would you call them like a fake collector or fake fan of the games? Like I know that's a term, like you're a fake, you're not a real collector. So how would you describe that?
um, I don't think it's really fair to call anyone a fake. The only sort of fake fans out there is somebody who really is a fake fan. Like they claim to enjoy the stuff and they don't even actually play it. Like, oh wow, I love Mario. Have I ever played original? No, ew, that's old. Like, I mean, if you prefer playing with a keyboard, I mean, why would that discount you from being a fan, or if you like physical copies from being a collector? It could be anyone.
Nice. So what types of things like in your collection or in your game collection you include besides like the games themselves? Like I know you talked before about posters. Are there like little trinkets or something from older games that you collect as well, or is it just the games like themselves?
So I definitely collect more than just the physical games. Of course, we also need the consoles to play them on. That's another
Mm-hmm.
thing. Not always, but there are some exceptions that we might actually talk a little bit about later. But collectors tend to like playing things on the original consoles, as opposed to things like I've seen like the Retron 5 and other sorts of like clone consoles that are like meant to make it cheaper to play the physical cartridges. I tend to like to play on the original NES or the Super Nintendo or the Genesis. Um, I also happen to have a lot of game posters. Like to fill whole game room there. You can see behind Pixel is Smash poster. It's a
Yep.
Portal poster on the wall. There's a couple favorites there. Um, Very much like that Smash poster. Probably my favorite one I have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, also a bunch of original controllers. Some interesting oddities like PlayStation 2 the light guns. Sorts of weird Atari controllers. Um, you know, Original controllers as opposed to knockoffs, but all sorts like to experiment with. Obviously for the NES, they offered things like the NES Max and the Advantage joystick, and
Yeah.
all sorts of interesting, cool old options that are fun to test out. Um, and then, of course, I have some memorabilia. I'm not personally a huge amiibo person, but I do like to have some figurines and such that I found over the years. You could see some of Pixel's favorite plushes back there, the Koopas. Um,
Yeah. There are
yeah,
definitely a lot of people as well who like love collecting like the amiibos and stuff that are like newer things. Like a lot of the things I have back here, I don't actually have them right now. I think you might be able to see them over here, but they're like older. Like I think we have the um, card of like the original voice actor of Mario. We have like a little Super Mario Odyssey coin, which is really cool, which are a bit older. I think the Odyssey coin's newer, but we have some other cool
It's
things that
actually
are
going to get
a
to
lot
that
older.
later, but Pixel's in a rush
Mm-hmm.
to show one of my favorite things I have. Of course, I'm also a card collector. We'll get to that eventually, and
Mm-hmm.
a cool crossover between the two worlds of things I collect is this right here. They
Yeah, you
one
stole
of
it.
the
I knew it was down here.
one
I
of
knew
the
it.
sets of cards they make has some celebrities in addition to you know, athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and one in 2019 who got into this set got to do some autographed cards is Charles Martinet, voice of Mario and many others. One of my favorite cards I have. You blazing them all with the woohoo. So fun little piece there.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and the last things I have is, in addition to consoles, a lot of people tend to forget the handhelds. Got to give some love to the Game Boy and the Game Gear and all those. And lastly, this is like a different aspect of collecting that I enjoy. Ways to play the games. Of course, older games are best experienced the way they are meant to be played on old fat CRT television, the tube TVs. Got to keep them around. They're all dying and people are throwing them out. But got to
I
maintain
know
the
you
tube.
just said how like you love collecting like the console, like the handhelds ones. What would you say about the Virtual Boy? Would you consider like a
The
handheld? And like
virtual boy.
what? Yeah.
Uh, well, believe it or not, I actually had a Virtual Boy, one of my better finds over the years, and it's pretty hard to call it a handheld. The thing is enormous, and the only way you can really play the Virtual Boy and not break your neck is to lie down and put it on top of yourself instead of using the stand.
Uh-huh.
Um, but then it's not really designed for that. So there's like a plastic beam that goes across your nose, where you're supposed to place like your nose in it when it's on the stand. And if you put it down on your head, like is the better way to do it for your neck, that piece digs into your nose, and you end up with like a red line here after you're done
Yeah.
playing. And it's like leaving another world when you take it off. It's really cool for like 10 minutes, but then after that, you remember you're playing the Virtual Boy.
Yeah,
So
so how do you like find those I know you said it's like your best find over the years, but like how do you find them? I know you can't just go to like to GameStop or Walmart and pick up a Virtual Boy that's, 20, 30 years old. So like how do you get all these games and stuff, and like how expensive are they?
Um, well, as for where to get them, of course, when someone asks, I want to buy a copy of Yoshi's Island, where can I get one?
Mhm.
The first answer is always eBay. eBay kind of stinks. There's a lot of problems with buying on eBay. We could talk for hours
Yeah.
about how you can get scammed and issues, but just unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that if you want one game and you gotta have it now, there's nowhere you're gonna find a better price than eBay. Um, I'll have some few tips later on how to make sure you're getting exactly what you want when you buy online. But eBay is definitely where you want to go, and definitely don't shop online at GameStop. GameStop actually does offer some old games on online, apparently in a few stores as well, though I've never seen it. Um, However, that being said, you definitely don't want to be shopping at GameStop because they don't offer photos of the actual thing you're going to get. They just have a generic image,
Mhm.
um, which means that you don't know the condition, you don't know if the disc is all scratched up, you don't know if it's missing the label or if it's written on, and most importantly, you don't even know if it's going to come with the box, which is a huge deal because the price of a game, whether if it comes with the box or not, changes significantly.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
like buying a game, whether it be a disc or a cartridge, without the box is cheaper than buying it with. And you don't know if GameStop is sending you the box or not. So you don't really know if you're getting a good deal or not. So I would never recommend buying online from GameStop. Um, but as for other places you can find games, when I talk about finds, I'm usually talking about visiting a flea market. Flea markets are really fun because you can search around and really hope to find like a deal. When you're on eBay, there's basically a market price, and that's what you're going to pay. If you want to buy a copy of Yoshi's Island, it's probably like $40. And there's a chance that somebody might list one for less, but you're never going to find a copy of Yoshi's Island for $5. It's just not possible.
Mhm.
But if you go to a flea market, there's always that chance that you could get lucky and someone could be selling a game for really cheap. But then, of course, there's the opposite problem. You don't have the selection. You just have to deal with
Yeah.
whatever is there. Um, So sorry if when you're I like to say if there's one particular game that you gotta have, then you need to buy it online. But if you're willing to try out whatever comes your way and you just want to get the best deal possible, visit places like flea markets, estate sales, garage sales, and look around. You never know what you might find. Well, I think I'm a little later. Let's talk a little bit about some more stuff, tips for being at places like that. But it's always fun to go try and find something cool that you never seen before or that you never thought you might have a chance to buy at a good deal at a place like a flea market or a garage sale. And
Yeah, I remember me and you actually went to the flea market. Maybe it was like a year or two ago. I don't remember. But I remember when we were there, you looked at like one of the tables that was selling like movies or something, and in one of the boxes, I think it was like a game that you were looking for or something like that. It was, mixed in with like DVDs and movies, and like the woman selling thought it was like a movie or something. Like, oh, you want to buy that movie? That's like $3, and it was like
that,
a $20 game or something. So you can
that's
get really
definitely
lucky.
definitely a good tip for disc game boxes. A lot of people don't realize that games
Yeah.
come in boxes that look similar to DVDs, and of
Hmm.
course, most people don't tend to sell DVDs for very much money because we got the modern technologies like Netflix and DVDs just aren't very expensive. So if you look through DVD stems, you're just spotting like Madden 2005, and it's really not worth it. But every now and then there could be something sticking out you're looking for, and it's definitely happened before for me. So always worth looking in boxes like that. Um, and of course, there are still some game stores out there, like not GameStop, but like individual stores. Whether they be there are a
Hmm.
few chains out there, as well as of course there's individual shops that sell old games. And though honestly, those are generally not the places you want to go to get the best deal. There is the advantage of getting to see the game you want to buy in person, and that
Hmm.
is a really big deal when you're trying to check for condition, scratches on a disc, um, and a double especially for looking for controllers. This is getting into the territory of speedrunning a little bit, but if you if you want to find the best controller possible to play with, and you're not willing to pay up for a brand new controller, which of course a brand new controller for popular consoles like GameCube or NES are very very expensive. You're probably going to want to buy a used one, but if you buy a used one online, you really don't know how it's going to feel. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, you don't know if it's going to be really mushy or ruined, or you're not responsive, or perhaps there's a particular feel you sort of like. Like I know Pixel likes to have his NES controller D-pads much looser than I do. I like to have them really tight. I feel like that's the most responsive, but he feels like after a lot of play, that tends to not feel as good, and he would rather that it be still responsive but a little lighter, and those are kind of hard to find. So ordering online is just not going to work for that. You need to be in person, try a couple D-pads, and find the best one you're looking for. And you can do that at like a flea market, hopefully, if you find someone who's got what you're looking for, or at a game store. So it's definitely worth looking up retro game stores near me and see if there happens to be one nearby you could go look at if you're looking for controllers, especially.
Hmm. So like when you're going to like online eBay, or if you're going to the flea market where you can actually see the games, if there's scratches, or the controllers, how do you figure out like what you want to buy? Like let's say there's a game you've been wanting for a really long time, and you can't find on eBay, and then you go to the flea market and you find it's like $100, but that's way overpriced. Like, would you buy it, or like what would you do? Um,
If it was way overpriced, I definitely wouldn't buy it. Buying at flea markets usually, unless there's something a special case like a controller, like I talked about,
mhm,
generally I would definitely not spend more than I would spend on eBay. Maybe not even as much, because even though there can be a lot of problems on eBay and things can happen, you are generally covered. If somebody sends you something that's really not good, um, or let's say it just doesn't even work. Like let's say you buy a Super Nintendo and it just doesn't work, or you
yeah.
buy a game and it just doesn't load. You can definitely have recourse to get your money back. But generally speaking, when you're shopping at like a flea market or something like that, if what you bought is non-functional, that's just how you got to live with it. It's happened before. I've definitely bought things and either had to fix them or just never got them to work at all. So you have to weigh the potential of losses like that versus how much you can save. Like I've definitely saved a ton of money shopping at flea markets over the years compared to buying online. So yeah, I've bought a couple things that didn't work or that I wasn't able to fix, but in the end, I ended up saving money even though those didn't work compared to if I had bought every single object I bought at a flea market online.
Okay, so like, let's say you go to the flea market, right? You buy 5 games, a console, and a cool Mario figure, right? And you bring them all home. Like, what do you do with them? Is there a place that you keep them? Is there like a specific way you like to organize it and stuff like that? Like, how do you deal with
Um,
all the stuff?
well, as for organizing games, obviously, you probably want to get a shelf if you grind a bunch of them. You can see one of my shelves behind Pixel there.
Yeah, you can see this one back here.
Tend to organize, by console. Is usually the way most people would go, unless you have a
Mm-hmm.
collection of a particular series. A lot of people like to put a series together. Say you're trying to get every Pokemon game or something like that. Um, and I tend to go alphabetical. If I had a much larger collection, I might take something like, say, the Player's Choice editions. Like, you can see it kind of stick out. The PlayStation 1 games there in the middle, the black cases, the ones with the little green there are the I forget what they call them on PlayStation. I don't think it's Player's Choice editions, but something like that. Um, but Platinum Hits or something like that. I might
Mm-hmm.
keep those separated out. Some people do that, especially if they're going for like every game on a console. They'll keep those separated out, either because they're going for every version or because they want to replace them eventually with nicer versions. The originals usually tend to go for more, or something like that. But generally alphabetical and by console. I kind of want to keep the consoles like ordered by release year, but that's just too much effort for just trying to fit them in the space I have.
Yeah, definitely. That can be really hard just to switch to that, especially since there's so many. Uh, so you have like all these games. Let's say there's 200 that you have, right? How often do you play them? Like you can't play every single game. So let's say you have an hour of free time and you want to play a game, whatever. How do you choose what to play? Is it like just pick one out of the shelf,
You
or do
know,
you
it is
what do
it
you
is
do?
it is sometimes kind of tough. Obviously, I can't claim to play every game I own since I have
Mm-hmm.
bought a lot of games over the years, and it is. But generally, the way I do it is I don't buy games that I don't think I'm going to like. Usually, there are some exceptions. Games I just bought because I want them for my collection, or games that
Mm-hmm.
were so cheap I just couldn't pass it up. It was such a good
Mm-hmm.
deal. But generally, I buy games that I think that I'm going to at least want to try. Um, and though you could say like, yeah, I have a lot of games, so the classic, oh, what am I gonna play? But think of it this way: I tend to only play games I have rather than like emulating stuff.
Yeah.
If I was using an emulator, you could say I have access to every game ever made through like
Mm-hmm.
up through the Wii, like every NES and Genesis and Super Nintendo and even obscure stuff like CDI and 3DO and PlayStation 2, everything.
Yeah.
Um, it's almost in that way, it's almost like you own more games if you're not playing physical copies and you're using an emulator because you have every game ever available to you unless there's some specific reason you can't emulate it. I feel like that would make it even harder to choose. I like if I finally find a game that I've been looking for at a good price, I appreciate it more and I can take it down and finally get to play it.
Mm-hmm. So when you play the games, do you have like we talked earlier about CRT TVs now, like they play a lot nicer. But if you play, do you have a preference whether a flat screen TV or a CRT? Because I know there can be a lot different, such as like input lag and whatever. So which one would you choose to play the game on?
So this is definitely something I wanted to talk about a little. I'm really into trying to get the best video output possible from
Mm-hmm.
various game consoles, and in my opinion, there's nothing for older games, which means everything that's not HD. So everything before the Wii and PlayStation generation, and as well as the Wii, because the Wii is kind of a generation behind in terms of technology. So the Wii, and then everything before that, except not the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, they all look better on a CRT television, in my opinion. And that is especially true for everything before the Dreamcast, because they output a resolution called 240p, which is like this special trick used for video games that modern TVs just don't really like it. Um, and you've probably heard of these things they call scan lines, which is just the look that these kind of games have when you play them on a CRT, where
Mm-hmm.
there's almost like a line in between every line of actual stuff. Um, and the sort of look that gives is the classic retro look that sorry about that, that they these games were kind of designed with, that they that they look best in. And there's a lot of advantages to playing on a CRT beyond just the look. Like for speedrunning, for example, you'll often hear people say you need to play on a CRT, and that's because of input lag. When you play one of these older games on a current TV, like a flat screen or OLED or a plasma, um, the TV is forced to upscale the game, which basically makes take its resolution and double or triple or whatever it takes every pixel so that it fills the whole screen. Otherwise, it'd be really, really tiny in the middle, right? So by doing that, that takes a little bit of time, which if you say you're watching television or a movie is absolutely meaningless. But when you're playing a video game, that means that the amount of time it takes to appear on the screen is
Mm-hmm.
it's a few frames at minimum and possibly a lot of frames, um, which makes it harder to time complex things. Um, so that's why playing on a CRT is superior because CRT has none of that and it's instantaneous. The only thing limiting the speed is literally the speed of transfer through wires, which is the speed of
Mm-hmm.
light,
Yeah.
um, which obviously isn't about to get in your way. And an argument I hear sometimes, I've heard this from a couple people on Twitch, and they're not. I don't mean to insult anyone in particular, but some people say that there's no reason why you shouldn't play on a flat screen because the input lag is consistent. It's the same amount of input lag, and as long as I can learn tricks with this input lag, it will always be the same, and I will never have a problem. Um, and yes, technically that is true. Let's say your TV has 10 frames of input lag. If you learn all tricks 10 frames early, then you're going to be okay. But what happens if that TV breaks or something happens to it? Um, Next time you get a TV, the input lag is going to be different, probably, because most flat screen TVs are not exactly the same. Even two of the exact same model aren't necessarily identical in terms of literal number of frames of input lag. Imagine having to relearn all the frame perfect tricks you know from
Mm-hmm.
like pipe jump
Yeah.
or whatever it might be. Whereas if you're playing on a CRT, every CRT in existence, unless it's one of the weird end of the CRT like 2005 ish, they call them EDTVs. But other than those, every CRT in existence has 0 frames of input lag, and that is a really big deal because you will never run out of choices to have that exact amount of lag. Of course, this is true for speedrunning, and it's also true for some competitive games like notably Super Smash Bros. Melee, um, and Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, other such old fighting games. Um, and but I'm sure plenty of people don't have the choice to have a CRT in their house, and there are other ways to make this work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and one of those is by having an upscaler, something like the one I use to display games on a flat screen TV is called the XRGB Mini. Unfortunately, I believe that they don't make it anymore, so they've gone up in price a lot. But there are other options, like something called the OSSC, the Open Source Scan Converter. However, the one problem with that one is it works a little differently. The technical level is a little bit above what I can explain well, but I don't think it's going to help you with the specific input lag problem. That just helps with video quality. But with the FrameMeister, what it does is it's a machine that does the upscaling itself. So then it sends it to the television, and the television no longer has to upscale. So there's no more input lag added by your flat screen TV. The input lag is added by the little box. Um, and of course, since that box is made the same every time, if that broke, hopefully I could get it fixed or get another one, and it would have an identical amount of input lag. And it also, I don't want to go too far into technical stuff with getting good video quality out of old consoles because that's a
Yeah.
huge topic that maybe I could talk about another time if people happen to be interested. But if you use the right sort of connections using what we call RGB or S video instead of composite video, it can help you get really high quality video. But looking at games on a flat screen always is going to look much different from looking at them on a CRT. They look more blocky and like retro inspired indie games like Shovel Knight as opposed to like actually old games. It's a very jarring difference if you've never seen the two side by side before.
So why does input lag happen with like emulators on your computer? Like if you were to play Minecraft, for example, with your keyboard, there'd be like no input lag. But if you were to play Super Mario Bros. The original on an emulator, on a Dolphin emulator on your PC, there would be like a lot of lag. Like, it's obviously consistent, but why does this happen? Because there's no upscaling actually involved. At least I don't think there is.
Yep.
So why is the input lag happening?
So the problem with emulators is again I don't know that much about this in terms of technical knowledge, but
Mm-hmm.
there is some sort of it's not an upscale. It's not the same way. They're changing the base resolution of the game. It's not actually upscaling, but the way it basically your computer is using its immense processing power compared to say the NES to attempt to pretend to literally be an NES. Um, it's
Okay.
using the fact that it has so much more power that even though it doesn't literally have the NES's parts, it can pretend to be an NES because it's so much stronger. But in doing that, it can't do it perfectly. And in order to interpret what this literal game file that is meant to be on an NES is saying, it takes a few frames more than it would to say play Minecraft, which is made
Mm-hmm.
for a computer.
Okay, that makes sense. So, like, going on the topic of games and stuff, uh, is there any game that you really want to have, but you couldn't find it, or like it just you found it, but it was just way too expensive? Because I know there are a lot of games out there that are very expensive. I don't know if there's any in particular that you would really, really want to have, but you just don't or can't find it.
Well, there's certainly plenty of games that I would love to have, but one in particular that's a little strange that I've been looking for a long time at flea markets that I've never found is NCAA 14. And a lot of you are probably thinking, wait, that's a sports game. Why would you want a random old sports game?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
generally old sports games, unless they be legendary, a la Madden 08, tend to go for very little because who would want to play, say, FIFA 2008 when you could play, FIFA 2020 with the current players and with current graphics and whatever it might be, and also online play? Well, there are some specific sports games from the past that are worth a little extra, whether they be because of jokes like Madden 08. Madden 08 is actually good, Bush. Um, and but there are some games that are considered to be some of the best in their particular genres and that maintain some value. Like for example, MVP Baseball 2005, or uh, you know, or weird oddities that aren't quite normal sports games like NBA Jam. But NCAA 14 is special because it's the last NCAA football game ever. Because there was a lawsuit that prevented the NCAA from letting that's the college players, from being in any video games in the future. So that's the very last one, and it means that fans are updating the rosters to this day of the 2014 game, and it's become a very high value item, matching the price of current new games because it basically is the new version of NCAA football. But the thing is, most people don't know that. So if I happen to run across it at, say, a flea market, most people are going to think that it's a really cheap, worthless sports game. Hopefully, I could find it for really cheap, like one of those, and save a lot of money. But I've searched for a long time, but I still haven't found one. Maybe someday, though.
So do you want the game for like the actual game itself, or do you want the game for like the history behind it? Because I know, like you said, it has a huge history behind it, and they're still updating like the game to this day, basically. So do you want the game for the actual gameplay, or the game just because it's cool to have and cool to tell the story to other people when they come over? You can show
That's,
them the game.
that's definitely a good point. There's both aspects to it. It's certainly an interesting story that it's the very last one. Even though the series was successful, they had to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, I would definitely like to play it because I'm a big, football and college football fan, and that is the way you could play with the most recent rosters in a game that is considered to be, in terms of like the gameplay, one of the best football games ever made. Because you might have heard recent Maddens are going downhill. They keep taking out features and ruining stuff. But this was before all that happened, and it just so happens to also be the one with the recent rosters, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
combination you can't get with NFL football.
So we've been focusing a lot on like video games and your collection, but I know you also we talked about this time earlier as well. But you also collect sports cards. So they date back, I know, really, really far back. So, like, when did the first cards ever exist? And, like, is there a huge history behind that, or did they just kind of pop into existence one day?
um, well, the oldest sports cards the oldest ones of individual players, at least, are from uh, nine or eight. Sorry, not 19, 1886.
Mm-hmm.
When a few tobacco and cigarette companies started putting little small cards, much smaller than current sports cards, in their packs of cigarettes as like a little incentive for buying their brand over another brand. And this was, of course, the beginning of cards. So they weren't just baseball players. There were some baseball players, but there were other athletes like you know jockeys, horseback riders, or pugists, which are like boxers, swimmers, as well as other sorts of famous people like actors and even U.S. presidents and stuff like that. All sorts of interesting people. It just so happens that among them were baseball players. And with the rise of baseball and American popularity around then, that idea kind of stuck. That people really like to, pull popular and famous athletes, especially baseball players, out of these sorts of consumables like cigarettes, and eventually it expanded till they started putting these cards in other sorts of things like that, like gum, or even things like Cracker Jacks and caramel and other sorts of like small foods people would buy. And especially the idea of putting it in tobacco stuck for a while, and then when they started selling them more to kids, kids did do some tobacco back in the day. They started putting them with gum, and gum became the really big thing,
Yeah.
where you buy a pack of gum and it would come with some baseball cards, or usually just one. Eventually, in the 1940s, some companies started to become bigger. Like some people might know the names of, like Bowman and Leaf. And then in 1952, Topps chewing gum became the biggest brand of baseball cards. And around the time, the 1950s and 60s, they started also making basketball cards. And before that, there were also some football cards by various companies. And Topps especially became very popular in the 70s, and then in the 1980s, in the late 1980s, other companies started to join them, like Fleer and Donruss, and cards became way oversaturated. There were way too many cards, and suddenly things that were gaining value over time, people realized, wait, there are so many of these. Why are they worth anything? You could like turn a corner and find a whole stack of baseball cards. So why should they be worth anything at all? So they started doing really, really interesting things with cards, like making some of them especially rare, or eventually doing things like adding pieces of jerseys to cards. Like, hold on, I've got some example stuff here. I keep forgetting I have examples. See, for example, I believe this card is from the early 2000s, but as an example, you can see there are some jersey pieces embedded in the card of the players. Those are like game used jersey pieces to encourage people to buy cards. Even if there were a lot of them, it was still a really unique opportunity to have something like that. And it didn't matter if they were as oversaturated. And they also started doing things like putting autographs in the packs, like I showed that Charles Martinet from before. But of course, obviously, also the actual baseball players. Like, for example, here's one of Bob Gibson, if you're not a baseball fan, he's one of the better baseball pitchers of all time. They see this is inserted into a pack with the autograph already on it. And that's the incentive to rip open packs. Never know when you might pull something really, really crazy, like a great player's autograph.
Yeah. So were the cards that were first in like the pack of gum, whatever, were those valuable at all, or like did they only get valuable when they started creating like rare cards, or cards that had signatures on them, or pieces of the patch from like their uniform? Like, when did they start actually getting their value?
Well, at the time, certainly nobody realized that baseball cards were going to become a huge phenomenon, and that they were going to be intriguing. Like, there certainly wasn't huge value in the cards back in the day. But while there's plenty of cards today that are worth huge amounts of money because of their intentional rarity and scarcity, if you want to have a little fun, put in Zion Williams National Treasures into eBay and sort by highest price first, and you can see some pretty insane sales. But but older cards are scarce naturally because obviously lots of them have been lost over the last 100 years, and cards of players like Hall of Famers and iconic players like everyone's heard of Babe Ruth, or for basketball in the 1950s, somebody like Wilt Chamberlain, or let's see, as for football, some early football stars like Joe Namath or Bronco Nagurski. that are really, really, really rare, just because there aren't that many of them left, or there weren't even that many of them made. Um, and so over the years, those cards have become really, really valuable. And let's see, a current event going on like that. If you want to, if you can Google, they call the Uncle Jimmy collection. Some family's Uncle Jimmy unfortunately died at the age of 98, and they found out that he had an absolutely enormous collection of really old and really rare baseball cards, including 6 of them signed by Babe Ruth, 2 signed by
Wow.
Lou Gehrig, and a bunch of other old superstars. And those are going to go for millions. So, there's always that hope that you never know. In the bottom of someone's basement, they might have something crazy.
Yeah, like it's crazy how, some people who are in like their 50s or 60s could have, a signed Babe Ruth card in their basement. They would probably never know for a really long time. So, as you said, cards date back like a really, really long time, basically since like the late 1800s. So you can't collect, the old cards and the new cards and, the ones with signatures and the one with the patches. So do you collect like a specific type of card, like older cards or like newer cards? Is there like a preference? Or like, do you like collecting the older ones or the newer ones because of the price? Or how does that like, which ones do you prefer?
Well, I collect like a range of things, but
Mm-hmm.
originally I was really into the new stuff. Like I saw these, they still sell them on store shelves. Like, what are all these cool new cards of my favorite players? But then I've realized over time that you can get burned. Like let's say, so I'm a Jets fan, so I have a small collection of some Jets players, and one of my favorites being Jets quarterback Sam Darnold is one of my favorite Darnold cards here, a rookie of him. But here's the problem: like, what if in a couple years Sam Darnold leaves the Jets, or it just turns out he's not very good? It's a really big bet if you're buying cards of a current player. It could turn out really well for you, or you could, they could become both worthless in terms of meaning to you, and worthless in terms of literal money. Like cards of a rookie who has a lot of hype are very expensive, but if they don't turn out very well, that could be a huge money loss to you. Like say when I buy games, for example, the chance that something like Super Mario Brothers goes down in value is pretty low. I mean, people are always going to be interested in that, but with players, if some people stop caring about them just because they end up not very good, that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with
Yeah.
older cards or newer cards of older players, at least, there's not much that can happen. Like if I have Reggie Jackson over here, um, Reggie is long since retired and he's very famous, and that's probably not going to change. So while there isn't as much potential for growth, that's not a big deal to me because I'm more into just collecting the things. It's more important to me that my collection isn't going to suddenly be worthless in the event that I really need the money for something down the road. But
So do you like getting the cards for like your personal because you like, let's say like you get the Jets, card from the Jets. Do you get them because you like the actual card, or are there some cards that you buy like an investment, like you buy a signed rookie card of Sam Darnold, so the hope that in 2 or 3 years he'll become like the best quarterback, and you could sell that now for like $500.
yeah, I tend to like to combine the two of them, as in like anything that I would buy as any sort of investment. I don't think it's a good idea to put a huge amount of money into sports cards. It's a losing game. Chances are, unless you pick someone really right, you're probably going to lose more money than you earn. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say I make some sort of like tiny investments, you could call them, but I tend to combine the two. Like say Sam Darnold, for example. I'm a big Jets fan, but I also believe in Sam Darnold, and I think he's going to be a very good player. And if he is, then the amount of money I spent on him it'll gain me some value in the end. Because let's say I spent $20 on this card here. If Sam
Mm-hmm.
Darnold ends up really good, it's going to be worth more than that. But I'm not looking necessarily to sell it because I'm a big Jets fan. But if I wanted to, I could. I do the same for the Mets, and obviously I've made some mistakes. Like for example, here's a Met I thought would end up being very good. His name's Anthony Kay. He was a pitching prospect for the Mets, but he has since been traded. So unfortunately, as a Mets fan, that one's not going to pan out for me. But so yeah, I basically like to try and combine the two of them. Um, and obviously, not every card I buy for a team is necessarily an investment. I buy plenty that I don't expect to go up at all, just because I'm a fan and I want to have their cards.
Mm-hmm. So I was looking at the chat, and some people were getting mad or they got sad that you weren't collecting Pokemon cards. But I know you do collect
Oh,
Pokemon cards.
I do.
Um, So there are some cards like Babe Ruth and Michael Jordan that are sell for thousands or sometimes like even millions of dollars. But how like intense can collecting Pokemon cards go, or how valuable can they get since they've only been around for like I don't know, like 20, 30 years maybe. So how valuable can they really get compared to baseball cards that have been around for like 100 years?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'd be surprised. Obviously, no Pokemon can't reach quite the heights of like baseball in terms of value. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's been cards that have gone for millions, and now there is no $1 million Pokemon card out there. But there are cards of Pokemon that are worth many thousands, believe it or not. Um, Now, the most iconic card in Pokemon is the base set Charizard, which you've probably seen before. The base set came out in the United States in 1999 and shortly before in Japan. And the Charizard with that iconic Ken Sugimori art, um, the a first edition version of that Charizard in perfect condition can sell as high as $20,000. And that is the most iconic card, and usually the one most people would think of as the most expensive. But there are other Pokemon cards that are actually worth a lot more because while that one is very, very hard to find in great condition, there are some cards that are very hard to find at all. Like the most iconic of that is called the Pikachu Illustrator. It was a like a I don't know the full story of it, but it was like a prize for a contest in Japan. Um, you can look up the Pikachu Illustrator on eBay. There's one listed right now for $2 million. I promise you, no one is going to pay that. It is not
Yeah,
worth.
that's a bit expensive for
It's not
a
worth two
Pokemon card.
million dollars, but
Mm-hmm.
it might be worth 100,000 or maybe even more. Um, it is a very, very valuable card, and there are other valuable promos because they've only been printed very little. For example, there is a sale recently on eBay of a very rare Japanese Kangaskhan promo for $75,000. Um, and one of the things that I'll never own, but that I think is coolest in Pokemon is when people place highly at things like the national championships and the world championships, because obviously Pokemon is a competitive game, they get a special card. It's like formatted like a real Pokemon card, but it's like a congratulations on first, second, or third place. And
Mm-hmm.
ones of those, especially older ones, and ones for first place from like old world championships, can go for huge amounts of money because they're the only ones of their kind in existence.
So I heard you use the word promo when you were talking about Pokemon cards. Is that like a term or something? Like I know baseball cards and sometimes basketball cards can be divided up into like eras, or like they can be divided up in like between how rare they are or something. Is that the same with Pokemon cards, or are they just kind of Pokemon cards? Do they not really have any like
All right, so
separation or any type?
I'm going to divide that up. We'll talk about promo in just a second, but about the eras. Obviously, Pokemon's over a much shorter amount of time than baseball, but
Mm-hmm.
there are
Yeah.
definitely some eras. So, starting, first Pokemon cards released in the United States in 1999, and they kind of kept the same format up through the Legendary Collection, which was like a remake of the first set. I don't think it was actually exactly the first set. It was a combination of the first three sets, which is base set plus Jungle and Fossil. Um, but they were printed in like normal versions as well as really, really beautiful reverse holographics that are like sparkly. That's one of my favorite cards ever. Is the Legendary Collection Charizard in the reverse hologram. Very pretty and very, very valuable card. And then after that, they started printing Pokemon cards with these very strange, thick yellow borders that a lot of people didn't really know what they were. But they're called the e-reader cards because the reason they have those thick borders is so that you could scan the cards with a Game Boy Advance e-reader attachment. It was like a barcode almost, and
Mm-hmm.
then you could like I don't know all the applications, but it was usually just so you could see like more like Pokedex information. They didn't do that much with it, which is why they dropped that after only a couple sets. But the e-reader era has some really really nice arts. Skyridge is my favorite set from that era, and each of these eras has some really really nice uh, cards in them. Oh, and of course from the first era, there's some people would separate out. There are four sets with the Neo. I don't even remember all their names, so that's a bit of a test. Neo Genesis, uh, Neo Discovery, Neo Revelation, and I forget the last one. But the four Neo sets where they started experimenting with some especially rare cards. In Neo, they have the shining cards. They have shiny Pokemon. Like there was a shining Mew, a shining Charizard, shining Aerodactyl. In the e-reader era, they started doing what they call crystal cards. They have a special sparkle to them, and they were especially rare, like Dragonite and again Charizard, of course. Always got to keep Charizard around, Game Freak and their Charizard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After that, during like the Game Boy Advance era, they started doing the EX series. All this pretty easy to tell because all the sets start with EX. Like, oh my god, can I come up with a single EX set name? Oh, EX Magma and Aqua.
Mm-hmm.
They stuck the little EX in front. And they experimented with a lot of different stuff during that, but of course that was the start of the EX cards, which were the especially rare ones for that era, that were extra powerful for competitive play. After that, with Diamond and Pearl, up through the set Next Destinies, which was during the Black and White games, they kind of they kept most things the same. They changed up some stuff about the actual like competitive game, like they simplified the use of Pokemon powers and bodies into abilities. But in terms of like collecting stuff, it stayed mostly the same. They started using around that time they called secret rares, which were it's kind of an interesting idea. Say a set is numbered out of 115 cards, right? They would have cards that were numbered like higher than that. So on the back, it would say 116 out of 115, and be like, what does that mean? It was just that those cards were they called them secret rares. They were extra exceptionally rare. Um, and Starting with Next Destinies, which is a really, really iconic set. Sometime maybe I could come back and talk about competitive Pokemon, which Next Destinies changed a whole lot for that. But they brought back EXs and they made them even better. And those started to be the rare, desirable cards. Also, later they added Mega Evolutions and GXs and all sorts of weird stuff. Like even before they started with full arts and um, basically we're just trying to come up with something new to appeal on the front of the box all the time now. I don't follow as much of the exact recent stuff, but I know there's been a lot of hype around some recent sets like what's it called? There's a Hidden Fates. If you're ever looking for something to buy off the shelf, I'm told Hidden Fates is what you want to buy.
What do you think the coolest thing you have, like a Pokemon card? Is it a specific card, or like it's like a specific pack or something you might have, like an unopened pack, or is there like something else that you might have that's really cool?
I used to collect a lot of unopened packs. I kind of sold out. I sold those because they gone up in value a lot. There's other stuff I wanted to collect.
Mm-hmm.
Money's not infinite. So unfortunately, I had to sell a lot of my Pokemon stuff. I used to have a couple of my favorite sets. A sealed pack like Sky Ridge and the base set with the iconic Charizard on the front. But now the one thing I did keep that I just couldn't sell is behind me. You can see it's an uncut sheet. That's the way they print cards in huge sheets like that, and then they cut them up with like a big blade that is shaped like each of the cards.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how they looked before, and some of those weren't cut up, and you can find them on eBay sometimes. That one's of Neo Genesis, a pretty nice looking set with an iconic Pikachu in it too. So that's the one thing I couldn't. There's a couple other relics I have that I haven't sold yet, but these ones I'm looking into sell to buy some other stuff. Like here's one of my favorite cards, the base set in Mewtwo.
Move it over a tiny bit. I don't think we can see it.
Sorry
Okay, there we
about
go.
that. The base set in Mewtwo.
Mm-hmm.
And my other favorite base set card, besides the Charizard, of course, I can't afford that. What do you think I am? Is the Machamp. Um, I used to have some more, but like I said, sold them to buy other things. Can't collect everything.
Mm-hmm. So how does like different cards, like you have Pokemon cards, baseball cards, there's other cards, football cards, basketball cards. So how do they all like vary, like either in price or your like how much you collect it? Like, do you have more Pokemon cards, baseball cards? Because I know there are thousands of every kind. So which one do
Yeah.
you like? How do they really like differ in collecting? If that makes sense.
Um, well, in terms of differing in collecting, sports cards versus other cards in terms of like how you get them and where you get them kind of differs because the notable thing about say like Pokemon cards or also like Magic the Gathering is that they're also a game,
Mm-hmm.
and the game tends to affect values. Um, in Pokemon, the game really only affects values with recent sets because Pokemon has a little something what it's called power creep, which is the idea that every set they need to be more powerful to entice people to buy them, right? If they stayed equal, people wouldn't really need the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
So they've raised the power so much that almost all old Pokemon cards are irrelevant in competitive play, and the most popular and basically the only played formats in Pokemon competitive are called Standard and Expanded, or I believe they might call it Extended now. I'm not 100% sure. Um, and those only include some relatively recent sets. So for Pokemon, it is mostly the older cards that have value are the ones that people see as iconic, or the ones that are harder to find. In Magic, the entire history of the game, there are plenty of cards that are you know both hugely rare and hugely important for certain competitive decks. So they see their value increased like uh, tenfold because of the crossover of those two things. Hard to find and very necessary, not just because you want to put it on your shelf. But in sports cards, it's basically 100% just the rarity of the card and the importance of a particular player. Like if you have a favorite player from like the 1970s in baseball, um, that's not a Hall of Famer or anything like that, chances are you
Mm-hmm.
can get the card for extremely cheap, which is fun because yeah, I do have some favorite players, and just because they weren't that great doesn't mean they're any less special for me. But it doesn't cost a whole lot of money. But if you are looking for, if your favorite player happens to be, Mickey Mantle, well, you're going to see those prices and probably fall out of your chair. So, um, for me, it's with older stuff, I like to try and find things that I like that aren't as common of things for people to enjoy, because that tends to mean lower prices. Like one of my favorite things I own is this card here. This is Dr. James Doint, who is considered the father of American tennis. People don't tend to care as much about tennis cards, so even though this card is from the 1800s, I was able to get it for not very much money. I do play tennis, and there aren't that many tennis cards out there, so this was a particularly cool thing to get. There are obviously some older cards that are of things that other people like that I like too, but I try not to buy that many of those because it's just an increasing cost for less cool stuff.
Yeah. Is there something that I know you obviously collect a lot of sports cards, some Pokemon cards, and some other Magic cards, which is another type of trading card game. But is there anything that you want to collect that you don't, or something that you want to collect more of, or something like that? Like I know you, like I said earlier, you collect a lot of other things, but is there something that you really want to collect more of?
Um, Well, outside of sports cards and video games, a couple other things you could say I collect, but just do a little of, and I wouldn't consider myself knowledgeable to talk about them all that much. Are I have a record player and I have a few vinyl records I've found at the flea market over the years. The nice thing about records is that unless you're looking for like really rare ones, and honestly, I don't really know enough to tell you what those are. They're really cheap because most people just want to listen to on Spotify or whatever, so you can get them for almost nothing.
Uh-huh.
And also, I enjoy like finding some coins, or whether it be state quarters or from other countries around the world. That's the cool part of that, is that of course, if I want a coin that is the 5 cent coin, I mean, just because it's the 5 cent coin in say Russia doesn't mean suddenly it's really rare or something. It's 5 cents. It's just 5 cents in a different country's currency. So
Mm-hmm.
it's only going to cost me 5 cents to get one, maybe 10 cents if I'm unlucky. Um, but something that if money were infinite, that I think is really cool, that I only have one of, is old newspapers. You can imagine having newspapers for all sorts of, like, the New York Times for historical events, like the end of World War II, or
Mm-hmm.
you know the one I do have is for the moon landing. Since I'm big into like space and stuff like that, imagine having one of them for the stock market crash at the beginning of the Great Depression, or um, the assassination of President Kennedy, or if you're a billionaire, perhaps even the assassination of President Lincoln. Something really interesting historical like that.
Yeah, it'll be really cool to have a lot of things like that, like the sinking of the Titanic or something, just like the
That's a good
headline.
one. I like
That'd be
that
like
one.
really cool just to have. Yeah,
The
so we've been talking a
Titanic.
lot
Yeah.
about like card games and not card games, sorry, a lot about cards and video game collections. But KreatorKat also does a ton of speedrunning. He hasn't really done that much in the past, but he's done some in the he hasn't done that much in the present, but he's done a lot in the past. So we're gonna do a short intermission where we're gonna do the first edition of the Pixel Pod quiz show. So I'm hoping that on each episode we're gonna do a quiz. We're gonna quiz our guests on something that they think they might know a lot about, but we'll see if they really do. So KreatorKat is my first ever viewer because he is my brother. So he should know a lot about my channel.
How do I?
I hope. So we're going to start with the first question. And if you're watching right now on the live stream, you can go ahead and put your answers in the chat as well if you would like. So the first question, you should know this.
I should?
When was my first ever stream? So what was the first day I streamed on? So is it A, August 13th, 2018, 2, August 16th.
Oh, this is too hard.
2018, August 21st, 2018, or September 3rd, 2018.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I'm gonna say August 16th.
So August 16th. All right, get your answers in chat if you want. The answer is A, August 13th, 2018.
Come on, that was close.
You were close. Yes, you were. Because
September.
Okay, this was the only question that I actually knew off the top of my head. The other questions I actually had to go and check. So...
Oh, and you're mad at me for not knowing, and you didn't know.
Okay, so.
Oh boy.
So if you get these ones wrong, I'm not gonna shame you. Okay, I promise. So this one's gonna be a bit more reasoning rather than just you knowing it off the top of your head. The second question is, including the miscellaneous category, how many different games are there on the multiple classic Mario game leaderboard?
All right, so let's count. So obviously there's Mario Hour. There's that new one.
Really quickly, Jason, the answer was A. So the answer was August 13th. All right, continue. Sorry about that.
So we got Mario Hour. We've got that new one that Seth Bling played. We got Decathlon, Pentathlon. There's NES Trilogy, Famicom Trilogy. There's definitely way more than this. There's I've only counted 6, and I know there's way more than that. I might just have to guess because I don't really know all of them.
So yeah, the possible answers are 8, 9, 10, or 11.
This is too tight. I was told that the answer to most questions in school is C. So let's go with 10.
You are correct.
Wow. Look at that.
So not including Warpless. So not including Warpless or anything, there is the Famicom Trilogy, NES Trilogy, Pentathlon, Decathlon, Super Mario Hour, Mario Teen Hour, SMB1 and SMB2J any percent, SMB1 and SMB2U any percent, Super Mario Land 1 and Super Mario Land 2, and Super Mario Land and Super Mario Land 2 100%. So you somehow guessed it right.
Somehow.
I don't know how, but you did. Okay, so question number 3. Again, chat, you can answer if you want. You don't have to. Question number 3 is, when was my first ever Mario Hour run? So is it number 1, October 9th, 2019, October 19th, 2019, October 25th, 2019, or December 3rd, 2019?
All right, I think it's either the 19th or the 25th.
Maybe.
Let's go with October 25th.
Nope. It is October 19th. October 19th.
Oh, that was my second choice. I told you it was
it was. You get half credit for narrowing it down.
Okay.
So the fourth question we got is, how many Mario Hour PBs have I gotten and submitted to the leaderboard? Because I've gotten a lot more PBs than I've submitted to the leaderboard. I think if you look on speedrunning.com, it goes 1 hour 1 hour 6 minutes down to 1 hour and 2 minutes. But in between, I got 6 PBs or something that I never did. So the possible answers are 4, 6, 8, or 10.
Okay, so we have your most recent one, the 58. We have the 59. We have 1009. We have like a 102. There was like a 104. There was like a 110 and like a 120. So I have 7, and that's not an option. So it's either
Mm-hmm.
6 or 8, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gonna be 8.
Think 8? Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure.
You're not?
Let's go with
Okay.
8 though.
The answer is 6. I'm really glad you know.
No, I was.
So,
Oh my god, I'm so unlucky.
so my first run I ever did was an hour and 22 minutes, but the first run I submitted was an hour and 12 minutes.
Oh well,
Then we
there's
got
the
an hour and
problem. I
6.
counted the 120.
Yeah, so we got an hour 12 minutes, an hour and 6 minutes, 102, 1 hour and 9 seconds, and then 39:59. And then 52:50. Wait a second. I just scammed you so hard. I miscounted
Scam me?
somehow.
How many? How many?
It's
How many? How many?
7. You said.
I said 7. Biggest pain.
I'm sorry.
Biggest-
I didn't count my PB that I have currently because the way like the way that speedrun.com works is that it has like at the top it says your PB, and then like lower down it says the PBs you submitted before. So I scammed you. So the answer is 7. You got it right.
Biggest brain of all.
Okay, we're gonna edit that out of the YouTube video.
You ain't editing anything out, my guy.
All right. So the last question. What is my first time I submitted for Super Mario Odyssey?
Your
So
first
is
time.
it 1 hour 1 hour 45 minutes and 34 seconds, 1 hour and 47 minutes and 54 seconds, 1 hour and 49 minutes and 12 seconds, or 1 hour and 51 minutes and 46 seconds?
Okay, I know it's not the 50 something. I remember that it was like a 40. I think it was 147. I think it was 147. Let's go with the 147.54.
Yeah, you got it right. Ooh,
I'm too
hard,
clean.
eh?
Let's go.
So yeah, it is a 1:47:54 was my first ever submitted time to speedrun.com. I think that is actually my first ever run that I did. Unlike Mario, where how I got a 122, but I only submitted my 112. So that's the questions I have. Hopefully in the future, maybe for like other people, we could have more questions, or more questions that I ask to you. But we're gonna move on now to KreatorKat's speedrunning because he has some speedrunning background. So he used to speedrun Mario Tennis.
I don't
So
get used to. I'm coming back. Coming back. Don't worry about it.
you're gonna come back soon? All right, I hope so. That'd
I
be
played
great.
I played a little recently.
So yeah, KreatorKat does a lot of Mario, or he did a lot of Mario Tennis speedrunning, and like he said, he's hoping to come back. So if you want to watch him do, like runs live, whatever, you can see below him, kind of right over there, kind of. You can see his Twitch account, so you can go follow him there if you want to watch live runs. But yeah, we're gonna go on to how like his topics, whatever. But make sure to stick around to the very end because we're gonna do a Q&A with him. So if you have any questions or whatever, you can ask them to him there. So just let's start off from the very beginning. So why did you start speedrunning like a weird game like Mario Tennis?
Yeah.
Why Mario Tennis?
Why Mario Tennis, huh?
Yeah.
So, really, it was because I wanted to try speedrunning something. First, I wanted to speedrun something short. I didn't want to play like you played Odyssey first. Odysseys were really freaking long.
Mhm.
It's an hour if you're great, and it's more like an hour and a half if you're not.
Yeah.
So I wanted to play something short, and also I wanted to play a game that I was already experienced with and possibly even good at. And I found Mario Tennis, and I played a lot of Mario Tennis when I was younger. I was shown it by someone. I thought it was really fun. So I was one of the first consoles I got was the N64, and I had my copy of Mario Tennis, and I played a lot of it. Very experienced with playing while distracted. The feel of the game and what would make for fast strats and stuff. And found out, wow, there's a speedrun page for this game. What do you got to do? So yeah, I saw that and I wanted to play, and since it's not very hard to get into. Like you can do your first run of the game after just a tiny bit of practice. It's not obviously a very difficult route or anything like that. And there were of course some existing runs, so I would know what some strats people figured out were, like which character to play with, for example. It was very clear quickly that Baby Mario was the play. and that was nice to see. If there hadn't been any sort of resources at all like that, I think it would have been harder to start out.
So I know in the NES, the controller is like really, really weird, and there's like problems with drift and the stick being really
You mean
loose or whatever.
N64, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry for the
Mhm.
N64. So has that affected you in speedrunning? Like, have you been on like a really good pace, or and like your N64 controller just kind of dies, or like what's your like background, I guess, with like the controllers and whatnot? Because I know it's really hard to find like a really good controller, um, like really like a long time after the console and the actual controller was produced.
So I'd say I don't think I've ever like lost a run because I have a bad controller, but
Hmm.
it was a little hard at first to find a good one. I got very lucky. I found a good N64 controller years ago at a flea market that I believe I still use that stick. I've taken that stick out of the controller and saved it because um, I've actually like worn down. You press the A button a whole lot in Mario Tennis, like a lot, because
Hmm.
after a lot of points, it's best to spam the A button to get the input in as quickly as possible, like for menuing and stuff. So
Yeah.
I've ruined A buttons and had to replace them, but the stick I've kept because that stick was just so good, and I've only ever really found like one other like it, which is the one Pixel plays with for Mario 64, and I keep my stick for Mario Tennis because and yes, N64 sticks are one of the hardest things to find, and if you find a good one, please keep it clean. Clean the inside of the bowl with rubbing alcohol. Uh, don't abuse it for like Mario Party. Oh God, Mario Party. Or if you can, even try and use a different one for Bowser throws because you can really really ruin one of those sticks, and they're very hard to find. And the only sort of stick in existence that can replace it, besides an official one, is Hori controllers have specialty sticks that are nice, but like you don't buy the cheap replacement sticks on eBay. They are not as good, I promise.
Hmm.
So it's never. I don't think it's ever killed me on pace, but yes, it was very very helpful to have something like that. And it is a little bit of a barrier to entry that if you want to be at any N64 game, like a top player, you probably need to seek out something like that. Like you need to buy a couple controllers at least, and hopefully one of them has a stick that you're comfortable with.
Hmm. So like Mario Tennis, it seems like it's such like a weird game to speedrun. Like it seems like there's so much RNG involved or whatever. Like which character you play against or where the opponent hits the ball, whatever. So like, what strategies do you think separate like the very beginner players from like the world record holder? Because like, it seems like there's a lot of RNG, and is that the case?
Oh yes, there is definitely a lot of RNG. That is never something we've ever figured out how to get around at all, unless there's some sort of manipulation out there that we don't know about. And I find that very doubtful because there's no way to play this game on the same frame consistently or something
Hmm.
like that. RNG will always be there, and whether you're the best player in the world or the worst, you're always going to lose your run in certain situations, whether it be Bowser in Star Cup Finals or Yoshi in Mushroom Cup Finals or something like that. But the sort of strategies that separate a top player from a beginner are, I think, well, first of all, it's as simple as playing as Baby Mario. We figured out Baby Mario is the best character there is. Some people they just enjoy running the game as other characters, whatever they played in their youth or whatever. There's people who like playing as Waluigi. There's a guy who's a big Daisy fan. And yeah, not every character is terrible or anything like that. But if you want to truly be consistent enough to go for top times, you got to play as Baby Mario. And as for the literal in-game strats, aces are a big determining factor. The timing on aces, trying to in tennis and aces, when you hit a serve and your opponent can't even touch it, it just gets past them and you immediately win the point. Um, the timing on aces can be very strict, um, especially against certain opponents. And being able to consistently do aces and even potentially throw in some aces that cannot be gotten consistently, just through a little bit of luck, is what
Hmm.
separates the top players from lower players, as well as the sort of risk taking. Like it's a lot of players when they're new will like to play tennis the way you expect tennis to be played. You serve and then you stay at the back, and you continue to play from the baseline like someone would play tennis in real life. And that is the most consistent way to never lose any points. But if you want to win points quickly in Mario Tennis, you need to charge the net immediately and try and hit a winner from the net. Um, Problem is, obviously, you will sometimes lose points that way, and of course, that necessitates resets.
Yeah.
So, if you want to put up top times, you need to be understanding of the fact that you are going to lose some runs to just things you can't control, or very small windows to hit volleys, which is hitting the ball out of the air from the net. And you need to be willing to understand that and go for those sort of difficult strategy or difficult or run killing strategies of sometimes putting yourself at risk for the possibility of time save.
Yeah.
Just one other thing that separates is knowledge, because like the amount of opponents you can get is it's not that expansive, but what is expansive is the amount of like positions. Like you multiply, I forget exactly how many opponents there are, but let's say there are 16 opponents, right? There's a little less than I think. Let's say there are 16 opponents, and let's say there are 9 different match positions where you could get each one of them. If you multiply those two, suddenly that's a much larger amount of possibilities. Or that's actually pretend that's not how that math is done. It's done with exponents. But the amount of characters and the amount of different spots in which you can get them. Say Mushroom Cup quarterfinals versus Star Cup semifinals. They're going to act differently. And the more knowledge you have, the more you understand both the literal sorts of choices you should make, like whether you should hit a flat shot or a spin shot, or whether you should charge a net, or maybe in this one you do need to stay back, or also just the feel of the timing, the experience you get with facing each character at each possible position, so you're ready for sorts of curveballs they can throw at you.
So like, there's a lot of RNG, obviously. Like you said, experience definitely helps with with running and getting consistent. But are there any resources that, like, if someone wanted to try out Mario Tennis, for example, that they could, watch like a tutorial video, or is there any way that they can learn the game other than just playing it for hours and hours and learning the RNG and just like how to play the game?
Yep. Unfortunately, Mario Tennis isn't a huge game, so there aren't like as expansive of resources as there are for some games. But we do have the current world record holder. His name's The Retro Prime. He recently wrote a guide that is available on the speedrun.com page for the most popular category, which is tournament cups. I definitely recommend reading that guide before playing. He describes how to make your way through the tournaments and some of the choices you should make. Also, it's definitely a good idea to watch, I think, a couple different runs before you play. Remember, this is not a game like Odyssey where each run is an hour. Runs of tournament cups are only about 11 to 12 minutes long. So I would suggest watching both a high-level run, whether it be by me or by Retro or someone else, just to see what the peak that you can strive for is, as well as like a middling run. So if someone a little lower on the board who doesn't go for as advanced of strategies, so you can see just what sorts of safer things you can do when you stay at the baseline, and how you could still win points just a little bit slower with that safety in mind. And of course, we have a Discord server that is available. You can reach from speedrun.com. And myself or anyone will be willing to answer your questions about playing. If you have any questions about running Mario Tennis, feel free to either ask in there, or you could DM me personally on Discord, and I'd love to answer any questions anyone has about speedrunning Mario Tennis. And of course, on the Discord, you can also learn about, there are plenty of other Mario Tennis games in the series that are both similar and different. Like Mario Power Tennis on the GameCube is the most similar game, but there's also a lot of games that are very different, either because they're in 2D, or they have longer speed runs, or because they have some RPG elements, like the Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color Mario Tennis games are much longer games with, of course, the idea of trying to win matches quickly as well, but also some distribution of stat increases over time, so some RPG elements that people are trying to optimize.
What do you think about like the newer Mario Tennis, like Mario Tennis Aces, for example? Have you played that game? Or, like, do you think you'd ever speedrun that? Because it's another tennis game,
Mm-hmm.
Like, how different is that from like Mario Tennis? And do you think you'd ever pick up Mario Tennis Aces and ever speedrun that?
I do own Mario Tennis Aces. I got it. And it is pretty fun. Honestly, I haven't played it in a long time, mostly because I've been busy. But at first, I thought I was going to speedrun it because it was the most recent game in the series. It had some of the stuff I was looking for. But unfortunately, the biggest problem for Aces is that they keep updating it. and these updates simply change the speed at which the game can be beaten. So it has that problem like Odyssey, where uh, unless you have like the most optimized version, you're going to lose a lot of time, and they keep literally adding, to the game. So which is good, from a player's perspective, but they've added like to the story mode and such, and changed the way certain shots work over time. And no one's really put research into figuring out exactly which version would be the fastest or whatever. And I don't think anyone's really willing to go through the sort of hoops people go through to play with older versions of Odyssey. So these sorts of changes have kind of killed Mario Tennis Aces as a competitive speed game in favor of the vibrant competitive scene it has. It has a very popular Discord server for some competitive online play. So I think that's the destiny of Aces, is to be played more that way. It's definitely a fun game, but as for speedrunning, I think it's probably best to compete in that one as more of a PvP game rather than a speed game.
So you're saying it should be more of a casual game rather than a speedrun game, unlike Mario Tennis, which is also fun to speedrun, but can also be played casually.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, there's a competitive scene for the game in terms of, actually playing, tennis with it, like in competitive online. And I think that if you're looking to compete in that game, these sorts of changes that, Nintendo has made over time are much more helpful to that. They fixed balance issues. I remember at the beginning, wow, the balance was so bad. The points were the same way every time. You would charge the net, you would use trick shots to go backwards, build up your meter, and then you would just try and win the points the same way every time. And I know it's significantly improved since then. And so the sorts of changes they're making are beneficial to competitive play, but they definitely do not benefit speedrunning. So I think Aces is much better played that way.
Nice, yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So I think that's going to be it for the discussion part of the first episode of the Pixel Perfect podcast. So if anyone in chat right now wants to ask any questions to KreatorKat or myself, we will be here and you can ask any questions. Yeah, we're going to prioritize the most important questions to the top, and some, if it's off topic, we might not answer it, but we'll see how many questions we get. And also, if you think this podcast could have done any better, maybe less talking, more questions or something, definitely let me know, either in chat right now, or you can hop over on Discord and let me know there. I would love to get some feedback, because this is the first episode. We definitely had some mess ups a few times, and we don't know exactly how we're going to do it again in the future. So if anyone has any questions or any feedback, I don't know, maybe not.
Yep.
If not, that's fine, obviously.
Definitely glad to hear if anyone has anything to say about ways Pixel can improve it in the future. Happy to help them out on the first one. And of course, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But if no one does, I think it was pretty fun, and was glad to come here and talk. And yeah, was a good time.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, KreatorKat.
Yep,
hopefully we'll be able to do some more podcasts in the future with some other people who I do not know, IRL, like KreatorKat. So hopefully we can do some other people who maybe are top speedrunners or really good at like League of Legends or Mario ROM hacks or something like that.
Getting in the league, Pixel?
No, I've never downloaded the game. I don't have any.
You want to catch the league disease?
Honestly, I don't want to download it because I'm scared I'm gonna get addicted.
Yeah, you know what they say about League. Once you try it, there ain't no going back.
Exactly. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the feedback.
Yep.
You guys did great. It was amazing.
I'll definitely chill you for a couple minutes if anyone has any questions about Mario Tennis or game collecting or games in general or anything about cards. Of course, glad to answer your questions. And if you don't, then I mean, I had fun, and that'll be it. Do we have a favorite game?
Do you have a favorite game?
Well, I mean, I think that's a question to ask separately. So, Pixel, you can go first.
My favorite game, honestly, it changes on the day. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I really like Odyssey. That's my favorite game. But then sometimes I'll be like, I really like Tetris. That's a really fun game. But in general, I'd have to say Odyssey, just because I started streaming that, and it's nostalgic kind of in a way, playing that game, and I'd probably have to say Odyssey for that. What about you, KreatorKat?
My favorite game, I didn't get any opportunity to show it, but it's also one of my favorite games I've collected since it's a bit of a classic and not that common, so a lot of people like it. It's a bit expensive, but it was worth it for me to buy. It's my favorite game, Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo. In my opinion, the best RPG ever made, and quite possibly the best game ever made. And, it's by Square, the company that makes Final Fantasy. They're most famous for these days, but I think they've never done it any better than they did at Chrono Trigger. Opinion on Tetris. I'm not very good at Tetris, but I've definitely had a couple times where I've been very into playing it. I have it actually on quite a few consoles because Tetris is pretty common to find. But yes, I'm not good at Tetris, but I like it a lot. I can get very addicted to those sorts of puzzle games, like Tetris,
Yeah, I
Dr. Mario
like it.
kind of thing.
I said this earlier. Like, Tetris is probably one of my favorite video games ever, and it's also kind of nostalgic in a way. I've never. Oh, that's not true. I have played the original Tetris. I haven't played that much, but I remember in middle school I would always play Tetris Online and Tetris Friends, like in homeroom and in school. So I really like that game. I like KreatorKat. I'm not really that good at it, but it's a fun game. It's really relaxing and it's just nice. It's like a fun, relaxing, simple game. There's a lot of other games that exist nowadays that are really like complicated. Amazing graphics and complex storylines and everything like that. But I feel like Tetris is nice because you take a step back, and it's Tetris. It's a classic. It's simple, and it's so fun to play.
Yep. So for Golden's question, actually, I think I showed this one earlier. This is of him as a Mets prospect, Anthony Kay here, but he now plays for the Blue Jays, and this is basically this is what they call a first Bowman, which is in baseball it's the equivalent to a rookie card because it's the first time a card was printed of them while they're a prospect. He played a few games last year for the first time for the Blue Jays major league team. But I believe if baseball ever starts up again, he's supposed to be a major player in their pitching rotation. See, do I have any other Blue Jays cards that are particularly good? Well, I have obviously one of the current best Blue Jays is Vlad Guerrero Jr. His stuff's too expensive for me, but I have his father, Vlad Sr., who's in the Hall of Fame, and ironically is a whole lot less expensive than his son, even though he's a Hall of Famer because his son is so hyped. See, I don't think I have any particularly nice cards of guys in the Blue Jays uniform though. Let's see, I am on the lookout for a Roy Halladay card though. He's one of the better Blue Jays in history. Unfortunately, rip Roy Halladay. He died a couple years ago. Have you played Dr. Mario? Yes, I haven't played Dr. Mario as much as Tetris, but I have Dr. Mario on the NES, and it's a very similar game in that it's similarly addictive, and definitely played it for like a day before.
Dr. Mario. Let me know if I'm wrong. Dr. Mario is kind of like Tetris in a way,
Yeah.
right? It's like
it's like the little pills or the blocks.
Yeah. Okay. So I've never played Dr. Mario personally. I kind of want to though. It seems fun, but I've never gotten my hands on that game. Gavin asks, what is the worst game you guys have ever played?
Game.
KreatorKat, do you have an answer?
I'm gonna think for a second because I definitely played some bad games. Well, I remember as a kid on the Wii, I had I didn't realize that like licensed games would be as bad as they are. So I had a couple like licensed games for like shows I liked. Like, I remember we used to watch the Amazing Race. That game was so bad. Even as a kid, I knew that game was bad. I was like, "Where's the fun? Why are we throwing tomatoes?" Yeah, that game was really, really bad.
You saying that now? I barely remember the Amazing Race, the game. # not sponsored. I just remember playing that. It was like there was a section where you had to like drive somewhere, and it was just like basically a loading screen. You just had to watch the bus just creep across the screen and get to the destination. Obviously, it wasn't in real time, but it was like if it was an hour-long bus ride, you'd wait for like a minute, and it was just slowly. It was it definitely wasn't the best game ever. The Aladdin game for the Sega Genesis was pretty bad. I've never played that game, so
really?
I don't know.
Is it? I thought I actually have Aladdin for the Genesis. I think, or maybe I have. But I thought Aladdin was considered to be pretty good. I thought, if I remember right, with games like Aladdin and The Lion King, what they did was the games were good, but they were really worried that kids were going to be able to rent the game from Blockbuster and then beat it like really fast, and then they wouldn't need to rent it again or they wouldn't buy it. So they intentionally took some of the levels and made them really, really, really hard so that the kids couldn't beat it. But so that those levels are kind of yucky, but that the rest of the game is actually quite good. Like I know there's this notorious level in Lion King, and I think it's the same in Aladdin, but I might be wrong about that. Any micro consoles? Well, you mean like the NES Mini or like that? Um, See, because I don't have an official NES Mini because like for the actual NES, I was once given the like a Chinese knockoff NES Mini, but I don't think that really counts. Um, yeah, aside from like handhelds, I don't think I have anything official that would qualify as a micro console. Also, don't have any of those other ones that people sometimes use the micro console, like the PlayStation TV or the PSP Go or whatever. Um, yeah, if it's a game based on a movie, I bet it's not very.
Yeah,
There
there are
aren't,
very
there aren't
few
that
games.
I mean, I guess I just funny because I just said Aladdin is a good game, and that's a game based on a movie. But most of the time, they're better. Shout out to SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom for being a good game.
Yeah,
But
speaking of games from like movies or TV shows, whatever, I remember playing. This is kind of random, but I remember playing Harry Potter or Lego Harry Potter. I
oh,
think
Lego Harry Potter, yes, I like that
those were
game.
actually good. That was a fun
Lego
game.
games are good though. Lego games are good.
Yeah, like except yeah, but like I feel like if I went back to that game now, I really wouldn't enjoy it. But like when I was younger, like I don't
No, I
know,
think you would.
7 or 8.
Lego games are fun. I sold that
Yeah,
game
they are
years
very fun.
ago, I think, but I kind of wish I didn't because Lego games are just I don't know, they're just kind of fun.
Yeah,
We
Lego
do have
games are
like
great.
Lego Star Wars. Like if I ever want to play that, I think I have Lego Star Wars or something.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I
So
think I
yeah.
like sold that game for some reason. I guess I just decided that it probably wasn't good, but it was. It was fun. I remember that.
Hmm. So I think that's where we're gonna end it. If anyone else has any questions, sneak them in before we
Yeah,
finish.
we
But
could chill, we could just chill for another minute because then chat's always a
yeah.
little bit
So yeah,
behind.
I think for the future we should have a bit more interactive stuff. I guess a bit less talking because it does
Yeah,
get a bit
maybe
repetitive in
we
my
could fit
opinion.
in like a question answer session earlier. Like after the games part, we could have done one.
Yeah.
Have part later. Yeah,
Yeah, and
Rehydrated
I
is
think
coming out soon. That's exciting. I might actually. It's on Switch, so we might even get that. It looks
yeah,
quite nice.
rehydrated
The
comes out soon.
graphics are pretty.
Yeah, they are.
Definitely heard Shift hyping that one up a lot. Understandably, kind of crazy how speedrunning kind of produced a game, caused it to be created when otherwise something
Hmm.
like that never would have seen attention.
Because
And now the remake.
without speedrunning in BFBB, the game probably would have just died, and rehydrated probably would never have been a thing. But since it's become so popular with speedrunning, and just casual
Definitely
players now,
very
it's
big
crazy.
contribution there.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think this is where we're gonna end it, unless you want to say any closing words, KreatorKat.
Closing words. Don't
Yeah.
exactly have a prepared statement, but yeah, this was really fun. I was glad to be a guest on Pixel's first episode here. Can't wait to watch more of what produces in the future with some other guests. Um, Hopefully, get some people come on and talk about other sorts of things that I don't know about. Um, it was funny. You joked about having someone talk about League. I don't know if you know any friends who know about League, but just hearing about stuff like that is I love hearing about competitive games that I don't know much about. Like even on
Hmm.
YouTube, sometimes I'll watch a video on controversies or big happenings in League or Dota or various shooters that I know nothing about. It's just fun to see people get excited over stuff like that. So hopefully you can have some sort of guests in the future that can talk about
Hmm.
cool stuff like that. Oh, we got one more question here. Jordan or LeBron rookie card? Which one would you rather have? I think this is a loaded question, but I would prefer Jordan both because let's be honest here, a Jordan rookie card is bare minimum $1,000, and depending on the LeBron you're looking for, it doesn't necessarily have to be that much over like $50. And also, the Jordan rookie card is particularly iconic in that there's only one of them. You know, or I guess there's actually technically there's a second Jordan rookie card, the sticker that But the design of the official rookie card is really iconic. And in LeBron's case, there's a lot of different cards vying for that spot. Do I collect Pokemon events in game? You know, the thing is, back in the day, events. We could talk about the decline of the Pokemon series for like hours, but back in the day, events used to be so cool. They would be like, you know, you wouldn't just be given a Pokemon. Like you could unlock a whole extra area you couldn't go otherwise. Like I remember I got the like the Darkrai event. You could go in that house that was locked and learn what was happening in there. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I always like wished I could have gotten the Oak's letter and visited the Shaman Flower Paradise. And even when I learned you could do a glitch and go there, I was so cool. And there was in Black and White, there was a whole extra story part that you could get if you got the Victini event. Now those were cool, but nowadays, I mean, they just give them out. I don't. So now I haven't played that much of like the most recent Pokemon games because I've always been just really disappointed by the direction of the series. And yeah, you just get them now. So yeah, not nearly as cool. So I wouldn't say I collect the events in game. Though in terms of older Pokemon games, I definitely have a lot of them. This one's a cool one I found at a store once. The Japanese version of the trading card game. I can't read it, but it was cheap and it looks really cool. I love boxed games. I don't have very many of them because they're extra expensive. Yeah. Oh, and when they gave out the original Mew, you could get like I mean, that one they just gave to you, but I mean that was the first time they ever did that, so it was super cool. And they give you like a certificate with an official like number for your Mew. You know, it was like a limited quantity. Like that's so cool. Or of course, yeah, you could glitch it with missing no, but that's a whole different story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, like imagine if you could like go into GameStop and get a certificate. Like, wow, that would be neat. I still think they should do that, even though it's kind of antiquated.
Where are the events like today? Like I'm not really into that at all, so I know nothing about it. Like, do they
You,
still
you
do
can
events that still exist?
Yeah, but you don't have to go places anymore. Like I remember even like when I was younger, like if you wanted to get the event, whether even if it was just something they gave, like I remember one time they gave out a Suicune. There was no like story; they just gave it out. You still had to like go to GameStop and like download it or whatever. But nowadays, you just like log in a particular like internet thing. You know, like you put in the particular information for your internet thing, or you can connect, and they just give it to you from home. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose actually that's kind of helpful, like literally right now because of the virus, but otherwise, like it's just not nearly as cool. Like, oh wow, December started. Now I can have my free shiny Arceus.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Just not as
Like,
cool as going somewhere and actually like it's kind of like Pokemon
yeah, it
Go in
was
a way.
like
That's why
special. It was like special.
yeah. That's why like Pokemon Go became so popular because it was like rewarding to like go somewhere and get something in return of that. I feel like.
Yeah, or a Nintendo bus in the parking lot. That would have been kind of sick. I always like those gaming buses that people would have like parties where you go on the bus and there's a bunch of TVs in there. Like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, yeah, the Nintendo bus. And like, this is where we keep the Mews, kids. They're in the case over there. Not sketchy at all.
Nope.
Ultra Super Speedrunner. I only streamed once recently. I'm kind of busy, but yeah, I do stream. I stream Mario Tennis speed runs, and occasionally in the past I had streamed a couple other things. My Twitch is below my photo there, so if you feel like following, you can. No promises on stream frequency. Pixel streams a lot. I stream a little, but yes, I do
Yeah.
stream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see Creator if you want to follow his either Twitch, YouTube, or friend him on Discord. You can see below. Like I have my social stuff like below here, and his is over there. You can see if you want to like talk to him off of stream, or if you're watching this on YouTube, off of the YouTube video, whatever. You can check him out in those places.
Appreciate
Thanks,
the follow,
Jason.
Ultra, and thanks, Jason. It's funny.
So yeah, I'm hoping
Welcome.
to do another podcast possibly in 1 or 2 weeks. So if you